Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes webcast. This is sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune football beat writer Dave Matter. Dave, Missouri coming off a 38-31 overtime win over Texas A&M. So that gets them back to the 500 mark, and it's kind of really the first really good thing to happen to this team this year. Do you think this is kind of maybe a springboard, a turning point, whatever you want, cliche you want to use as far as turning the season around? Is there a chance this team could win 4 more games and go 8-4?
It could, just because the rest of the schedule, you've got, I think, 4 teams that are beatable. Definitely Kansas at the end. No use in even talking about them. But Baylor has not been good defensively. Offensively, they turn the ball over a lot lately. That's who Missouri plays next. Then after that, you got 2 home games against a Texas team that is better than they were a year ago, but still has a lot of flaws. And then Texas Tech. They lost at home to Iowa State last week, so it's a crazy league once again. I don't think there are any givens other than the fact that Oklahoma State's really good, and Oklahoma's really good too, even though they lost once already this year. So yeah, I think all 4 are winnable games, and I also wouldn't be surprised if Missouri stumbles in these next 3 because they've proven to be a team that's pretty inconsistent, and just when you think you have them figured out, they have some struggles.
I think maybe the most dangerous of the games for Missouri is this one coming up, because there's a chance you're going to really get caught in a shootout type game, and Missouri's offense hasn't been really consistent enough, and in my opinion, to win a game that's going to be in the 40s. They'll have spurts, but then they'll take 2 quarters off. They take the 3rd quarter off almost every week for whatever reason.
Right.
So, and the other thing is we're going to have to see from James Franklin whether he can do it 2 weeks in a row. He's been very good sometimes and very bad others, and so what we haven't seen is for him multiple weeks in a row to put it together.
Yeah, and I think turnovers are going to be a huge factor in this game. That's been the one thing that's held Baylor back, is they've been turning the ball over a lot lately. 15 turnovers, second most in the Big 12 this year. Their turnover margin in conference play is the worst in the league. If James Franklin can protect the ball and the defense can do what it did a week ago in the second half at A&M and force some turnovers, then I think Missouri can win this game.
Okay, Missouri defensively in the first half gave up 28 points. A&M just basically doing whatever they want to up and down the field. Second half, though, like you mentioned, they only give up a field goal. They force 2 or 3 turnovers, hold them for 2+ quarters to 3 points. Do you think there's any carryover now against Baylor, against who I think Missouri players probably at least would characterize as the best quarterback in the Big 12?
We'll find out. I thought Missouri's secondary covered a lot better in the second half of that game. They made some plays on the ball, which they hadn't done all year, really, to this point. E.J. Gaines has to a degree, but not like he did in the second half of that A&M game. They played pretty well against the run. They didn't give up big plays. They got a little bit of a pass rush to where they at least disrupted Tannehill a couple times, forced the 1 interception that was created by the pass rush. Then they knocked the ball loose from him once or twice in the pocket. So those are the kind of plays we expected to see from this Missouri defense all year, and really haven't. Can they do it 2 weeks in a row against another really potent, explosive offense? Not so sure, but at least we've seen that they're capable of it. Now, can they actually do it? I don't know. They've got some injuries up front that I think might limit them a little bit. Terrell Rosano, Brad Madison are both on the depth chart, but I think they're going to take things pretty cautiously this week during practice. Baylor, they're very explosive like we've seen this year, but they have their flaws too, and they've lost some games this year and weren't very competitive against Oklahoma State, weren't as competitive against A&M, and really gave up just about got beat every possession at TCU earlier in the year, even though they won that game. So they're not a very complete team either.
All right. I think defensively for Missouri, like you mentioned, E.J. Gaines is the guy I think you can put on Kendall Wright and feel halfway decent about that matchup. And it's just a matter of whether the other guys can hang in there. And then obviously the pass rush. Missouri hasn't faced a lot of really mobile quarterbacks this year like Griffin is. I mean, Osweiler is just a big 6'8" statue who picked him apart pretty good. Landry Jones is not really a scrambler. Williams is not a scrambler. Last week, Tannehill is not a scrambler. So they haven't really faced a guy like this. It seemed like a few years ago every quarterback in the league was running all over the place. Not really the case, so we'll see if their pass rush can get anywhere near this guy.
Yeah, and one other factor, a game that might be, you expect to be a shootout, field position is always important, but Missouri's the best punting team in the Big 12. Baylor's the worst. So maybe that comes into play as far as just if it gets into a battle for field position there late in the second half.
Now, Missouri's running game, I think maybe even David Yost has become convinced at this point that this is really the way to go, to lean on them. Facing last week the number 5 rated rushing defenses in the nation, and Henry Josey again, 162 yards. He is on pace, if they go to a bowl game, to become Missouri's single-season rushing leader. You've seen a lot of Missouri football. He is the best Missouri running back since.
I think he's the best I've seen, and if you got to take into consideration the style of offense Missouri plays, but I think Henry Josey could be doing what he's doing in Missouri's old Larry Smith offense, that was an option-based attack, but probably more physical up front, not as much of a threat to pass the ball, but I put him up against. I think he can fit in better in those offenses than maybe Devin West or Ernest Blackwell or Brock Olivo would in these offenses. They were more plodding, offenses that didn't average a lot of yards per carry. Olivo and West were more 4 or 5 yards per carry guys, which are fine. But he's 8.5 at this point, which leads the country. I think he's the most explosive that I've seen. He's at least having the best season of anyone I've seen, even though West was really good in '98 and probably would have been better a couple years before that if he would have gotten the ball more. So I'm going with Josey at this point.
Yeah, you could probably go back as far as James Wilder, probably to the last guy that was, you would say, compared favorably. I'm with you. I watched all those Larry Smith teams, and I think Josey is probably the best I've seen since that era. Now, when you start talking about a guy like James Wilder, he was probably in a little different category. But couldn't have been more impressed, and really did not see it coming. I mean, last year you could see, I remember in a couple of the early season games against lesser competition, he really ran away from some people, and we thought, wow, this guy might be really good. But then as the year went on, he was fine for a freshman, but just kind of one of 4 running backs. It didn't seem like, for any particular reason, was better than the others.
Yeah.
And then once the games have started this year, it's been amazing.
Yeah, the big play threat that he brings, and combine that with James Franklin too, because I think they go hand in hand together, because the threat of one makes the other one a little bit more dangerous too on those zone read option plays they run. But I think this is one of the best stats I've seen for Missouri's rushing game. They have the 5th most 10-yard runs in the country, 10 yards or more. The 4 teams that have more than Missouri: Army, Georgia Tech, Air Force, and Oregon. You're talking about 3 run every down type teams that run the triple option, and then Oregon, which is the best, running spread attack team there is. So I think that's pretty good company for Missouri to be in. It just speaks volumes to what Josey's done this year.
And we should probably give a little bit of credit too to the offensive line. They changed a few things this year to get a little more physical instead of just shielding guys. And you've seen with Missouri's other running backs too, they've been averaging a little more than they have in the past. Kendall Lawrence has been fairly productive, James Franklin. So give those guys some credit too. But
yeah, absolutely.
You're seeing instead with Josey though, what other guys might have a 5-yard run, he's breaking it free. So
yeah,
he's a little bit on the difference maker.
There was a question this week asking if what makes him so good because he's not that fast. I think he's the fastest running back we've seen in Missouri, in the last 15 years or so. He's really fast, and he's just so decisive too. He doesn't waste any motion back and forth. He finds a crease and he goes after it and can still make guys miss, but he's very north and south, which when you hear north and south running backs, you think of big, huge Devin West type guys. But no, he's a little guy that runs in a straight line.
All right. Well, check with us again next week when we will discuss the Baylor game and look forward to the home game against Texas.